In 1919, one of the major issues was the world climate, the global environment. At a local level, you wouldn't have seen that in the UK and in Wales during the race riots, but it was very important to the politicians. Now, the race riots were a shameful part of that year, and when revolution across Europe seemed possible to the politicians, they were afraid. And you understand the way they acted. You've got to understand what happened in 1919 across the UK. And then maybe we can grasp why it seems black and minority people were used to ease tensions. The straight fact is the fear was communism and the fear was revolution. Most people believe that the war simply ended, but that was not true. Because in December 1917, during the Bolshevik uprising, when the Red Army of Lenin, etc., were removing the monarchy in Russia, France, Italy, and Britain signed an agreement to help the White Army, the monarchy army, fight against the Red Army. Churchill, particular, felt very, very angry is underestimating it. He was a part of a ruling class that was removed in Russia. He was part of the British equivalent. Now, he wanted to slow down demobilization, not remove conscription, so that Britain could go to war in Russia. The problem is the troops were tired. They'd signed up to fight Germany, not to carry on fighting forever. So David Lloyd George, the Prime Minister, and his Minister of War decided the answer was to stop any revolution in Britain. And they were afraid there would be one. And it must be understood, if people read Simon Webb's book on 1919, they realise we came very, very close to a revolution. So this is a simple timeline. There will be things that are missing on it. To understand why the race riots were easy to happen and the state of mind of the white mob, you need to understand the riots, strikes, uprisings, and racial violence that occurred as part of that year. In January 1919, on the 3rd of January, in Folkestone, thousands of soldiers blockaded the harbour and marched on the town hall when they heard a rumour saying they were being sent back to France. The same happened in Dover, and in Dover they formed a soldiers' union. Well, that's mutiny. On the 7th in January, barely reported 7,000 soldiers marched from Shoreham to Brighton Town Hall demanding demobilisation. On the 9th, 1,500 soldiers marched on Downing Street to confront Lloyd George. He did not meet them. One of his brigadiers did. On the 13th, in Milford Haven, there was a mutiny aboard the HMS Kilbride, and the Navy ensign was taken down and replaced by the red flag. 15th of January, in Southampton, 20,000 soldiers went on strike, and that had to be broken up after about 6 days by bringing in a brigadier. And on the 21st, not a soldier strike, but much more serious in a lot of ways, in Dublin, Sinn Féin, after getting MPs elected in the 2018 general election, said they would not go to Parliament to take up their seats, and they declared an independent island in Dublin. 23rd, Glasgow Harbour riot. 26th, Calais. The British Army in Calais, there was a mutiny. The men wanted to come home. They were told they weren't going to, or at least that's what they heard. So men from the Val d'Oliva camp and the Vendreux camp actually mutinied. And they were supported by the women of the Queen Mary's Army Auxiliary. On the 27th, trade union action started. And in Glasgow, trade unions called a general strike. Similarly, in Belfast, the trade unions called a general strike. On the 30th, back in France, in Calais, the army suppressed the mutiny, but they were afraid of reprisals, and not one person was charged with riot or mutiny. And on the 31st, in Glasgow, the Battle of George Square, Churchill sent tanks in to break up the strike, which was for a 40-hour week. Then in February and April, On the 3rd of February in Lincoln, the Sinn Féin leader Eamon de Valera was removed. He escaped from Lincoln prison. On the 4th, the race riots started in South Shields. And on that same day, 4th and 5th, in North Wales, the Canadian soldiers based at Kinmore Army Camp rioted. They demanded to be repatriated back home. 78 were arrested, 25 sent to prison, 3 of the rioters and 2 guards were killed. On the 11th of March in London, there was the Battle of Bow Street. The riot involved an estimated 2,000 Australian, American and Canadian servicemen fighting against 50 Metropolitan Police officers. And on the 12th of March, there was the race riot in Salford in the Greengate area. And on the 15th of March in Wales, the teachers' strike in the Rhondda. Then 17th of April, Limerick. They declared a Soviet. It's important to understand that the word Soviet actually meant a council. So effectively in Limerick, they decided Limerick would become a Soviet council led by the people and an independent republic. They even printed their own money. On the 5th of June, in Liverpool, the race riot started. 8th of June in Newport, 11th of June in Cardiff and in Barry. And on the 14th of June in Stepney, East London, an Arab coffee shop in Cable Street was attacked by the white mob, and Chinese and Caribbean people were attacked. On the 15th of June, Surrey, in the Canadian troops rioted in Epsom, and a police sergeant was killed. And on the 16th of June in Poplar in East London, the Chinese were attacked, and later that day, groups of West Indians. July 1919 was no quieter, quite the contrary. On the 3rd of July, the first coal miners' strike. That was in Derbyshire, then Yorkshire, and then in Merthyr. And on the 23rd of July in Luton, the town hall was burned down by soldiers. And the statement made by the town clerk says grievances mentioned were of more serious importance, more serious, unquote, than their annoyance at a Remembrance Day ceremony they were proposing. More serious importance, such as alleged unsatisfactory allowances to discharge soldiers and their dependents. The 23rd of July, Bilston near Wolverhampton, rioting by soldiers. 25th of July, Swindon, rioting by soldiers. 25th of July again in Coventry, and this lasted a few days, soldiers rioting but general looting. Moving on to August, and on the 5th, there was a national bakers' strike. Now, national strikes were uncommon, and on the 7th of September in London, the police went on strike for union recognition. Same day in Liverpool. The reaction of the government to that was 3,000 police officers were dismissed nationally, and they introduced legislation to stop them striking. 27th of September, the National Union of Railwaymen held a 10-day strike nationally. 30th of September, staff at the Daily Sketch in London refused to print criticism of the railway strikers. And on the 7th of November in Cork, soldiers were rioting again. 2 police officers at least were shot over a 10-day period. Now, the press, as always, handled these things, and government responded in their own way. So some quotes from the period. The Times stated, "We're asked to publish, but have no intention of publishing, a great many letters on the subject of demobilisation, which show a deplorable lack of responsibility on the part of writers, fanning an agitation which is already mischievous and may become dangerous. These demonstrations by soldiers have gone far enough." Should be mentioned, although this wouldn't have affected the right-wing press, there were still restrictions on press reporting. War restrictions were still in place. Churchill later wrote that in 1919 he strove with all his energy against communism, because at that time I considered communism, with its idea of world revolution, the greatest danger to the British Empire. The strikes, riots, and mutinies were all seen as being part of a communist uprising. So all across Britain in 1919 there were tumultuous events, mutinies, strikes, and race riots. It was a year of revolt. It was also a year when working people and members of the military felt betrayed by their newly elected government. That was a government elected on a massive majority. We will next look at the global picture. It's important to understand that although not even the press were reporting the picture of the world all over, Downing Street would have been in touch with all of the world leaders, all of its representatives across the British Empire, and would have seen a bigger, more frightening picture. A picture that was to lead to such things in the empire as over 300 people dying in the Punjab as they were massacred at Amritsar. This is Jamie Baker and this is HDA Cardiff. The Racial Riots Project 1919, which is supported by Heritage Lottery in Wales.